And even coming back to work, which in itself is traumatic, the first thing I got was a hug from Selma saying, you're going to be okay. And, because the grieving process, it starts from when you learn that they're sick until years after, because you're second guessing, did you do everything right?
Did you know that in 2020, there were 53 million caregivers in the United States? And by 2025, this number is expected to grow to 62.5 million. 73% of these caregivers also have a job. They are called working caregivers, and they are invisible because they don't talk about their caregiving challenges. Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees, is a podcast that will show you how to support working caregivers. Join Selma Archer and Zach Demopoulos on the Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees podcast as they show you how to support working caregivers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are today. We thank you, subscribers, for coming and listening to our podcast, The Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employee. I'm Zach.
And I'm Selma.
Hey, Selma, I hope it's a lot warmer where you are than where I am in New Jersey. We're going to hit like 4 as the lowest.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we're a little bit warmer. We've been in the 30s lately. So.
Oh, man, I got to tell you, well, California's had enough going on where our hearts and thoughts go out to
Yes.
To all the fires that are going out in California. And so you don't need it to be real cold. You just need rain.
You got it.
Yeah.
Rain and less wind. So we are here with our special guest today, Dahlia Sizer from Saint-Gobain. And we are so excited to have her with us. And we're looking forward to her insights from the inside of a company and looking out and telling us what we can do to help support working caregivers. So welcome, Dahlia.
Thank you. By the way, I think it's 16 degrees. I'm in Delaware, so I'm not too far from you, Zach.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, man.
Well, yeah.
Well, I'm going to stop complaining.
Yes,
because
please.
I've been complaining about the 30s and the 40s. So you guys just shut me right up. So again, welcome. And we like to start out our discussion. Tell us something interesting about Delaware.
That's a good question because I've only lived here for 6 months. But I will say I have gone 25 miles south of where I live to Rehoboth Beach. And they have the best seafood outside of Maryland. So I like going, and I'm a seafood eater. I always tell people if I were stuck on a deserted island with a group of people, I would still be the only one that's fat because I love seafood. So great seafood in Rehoboth, Delaware.
All right, we're going to have to do a shout out to them. And what's the go-to? What should we get off the menu there, Dahlia?
I'm lobster. I like the lobster towers, the seafood towers. That have
Who does not like lobster towers? I love it.
Good.
Yes.
That sounds pretty good. So Dahlia, let's start by taking a look at your own caregiver journey with your mom. I know that you had several years of experience as a caregiver when she was alive. So can you just give us maybe a short little insight into how that journey happened and what it was like for you?
Well, my journey started in 2005, and luckily enough, Selma was my manager when this happened. And so I was at work when I got a call that my mom needed me to come up to Vermont. They had just relocated to Vermont a few years before. Luckily for me, I had a manager who was very gracious. I found out that my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer, and it was in one lung. So what began this journey was every Friday, I began to drive up to Vermont from New York City and spend the whole weekend with her there. It really changed my life because if you know my family, I am next to the baby in the family, and I've always been sort of the wild child. And all of a sudden I had this responsibility for my mom, which it really grounded me in maturing, So it got to the point where, unfortunately, the cancer jumped to her other lung, and it did it pretty quickly. So what ended up happening was, again, I'm back at work every week, and I got a call saying, your mom is now considered terminal. And I'm at work and they're telling me this, and I'm saying to myself, what do I do? Because this had never happened where I had to be a caregiver. I was going up for the appointments and everything, but it just turned on a dime that now she was considered terminal. So what do I do? I'm still driving up. I'm still trying to figure this all out. And luckily I had a manager who said, take the time off. Take the time off, go spend it with your mom, however long that may be up in Vermont, and don't worry about what's happening here. So that very evening when she said that, I packed up and I went up to be with my mom. Now, what's important to understand is during that time, I had to figure out how to make sure that she got to the doctors, how to make sure that, the medication was filled, how to make sure that she started talking with her lawyers because she was coherent. She could make her own decisions. I was lucky in that way, in that those decisions we made together. But I also had, to make a living, and I was also in school at the same time. And how was I going to navigate all of these things by myself? And finally, I had to say, it's time for me to, one, make sure my brothers helped, and two, start reaching out to the family that I need help. My condo payments still had to be paid. My car notes still had to be paid. I had doctor bills that still had to be paid. I still needed to make a living, but I needed to also be with my mom. So what I did, and I tell everyone to do this, instead of waiting for people to say, do you need help? Call. And I called her siblings and I said, listen, you need to go up and spend time with mom. What weekend can you go? What week can you go? I had a brother who lived in Vermont. I called him and said, I need help. She's getting to the point where she's too weak to get up and cook. He would come every night after work and make her dinner. And then an uncle of mine who lived in New York said, listen, I'm retired. This is my sister and she's taking care of me. He's younger than her. I'm going up there. And so we had, people come. My other brothers, I got on the phone and I said, I don't care what you do. I don't care what you've got to move. You got to come up and help. And they dropped everything and they came up. The one special weekend was I stayed home. All my brothers came and they spent the whole weekend with her. And, she called me and said, I can't believe that you did this. And then things just kind of happened. And when we got to the point where we knew that she only had a certain amount of time, the hospital actually became involved quite a bit and sent to me a transitional worker, which means that they walked me through the steps of her transitioning and really sat down with me and told me what the signs were, what to look for, making sure that everything was in place. So for some people, they didn't have that. They don't have that. And I'm very grateful that I had all of those things. And then when she passed, everything was in place. Everything kind of fell in the right way. And I'll say this, if I didn't have a manager and a company who truly cared about what was going on, I don't know what I would have done. And I cringe at even having to think about it. And even coming back to work, which in itself is traumatic. The first thing I got was a hug from Selma saying, you're going to be okay. And, because the grieving process, it starts from when you learn that they're sick until years after, because you're second guessing, did you do everything right? So was that 3 minutes or was it 5 minutes?
Don't worry. The hug from Selma, I'm already getting my Kleenex out here. It's just...
I'm going to just piggyback on that story. And one of the things that really jumps out, and I think we've all experienced this, is we learn that caregiving cannot be done by one person.
Not at all.
It takes a team, it takes a group, it takes a family, it takes a unit. And so, you learned how to get that support for yourself, and you had that support at work. So my question for you is, as an employer now, what do you see as one of the major challenges for employers in supporting their working caregivers?
This is really serious because as a Gen X, we are holding the hands of baby boomers and those before them. I think they're called the silent generation. Employers have to realize that this is a time and a position that everyone is going to go through. And that this is not a time to micromanage. It really is a time to be supportive of your employee and to work with them. Sometimes for some employers, it may be allowing them to work remote for an extended amount of time. We're in an era where we can do that. You don't have to be in the office every day if you're not face-to-face with a customer. I think we have to move away from the premise that people are going to work better in the office, and that's just not true. With a caregiver, being able to take that parent or that child or whomever it may be that they're being a caregiver for, go to an appointment and then come back home and go back on the computer and do work or do meetings is invaluable, not only to the employee, but to the company, because productivity does not stop. And so taking advantage of a hybrid kind of work environment or work culture is really essential.
Dahlia, thank you again for sharing your personal story. Sorry for your mother's loss. May her memory be eternal. And I can only imagine when she was there with all those sons sitting around her, like, who the heck put these guys together? This is awesome. I mean,
it is.
But I'm just thinking about as a follow-up to Selma's question on the employer side, if you can just share a little bit on the employee side as a working employee who has to caregive like you did, going from New York to Vermont and doing all the things that you do. And also in your current HR leadership roles, can you share a little bit about what a working caregiver goes through in terms of the workplace and work life?
Well, I can also speak on that because I've been a caregiver to that same uncle who helped me with my mom. So I was a caregiver for him. I was a caregiver for an aunt. And we have a big family. My mom had 7 siblings. And so at some point, we were all caregivers, and we're a caregiver now to an aunt who's in her 80s in Florida. So for an employer, that support is so needed. And not only the employer, but your colleagues. They also have to understand what you're going through, because that culture can be very nurturing for a caregiver. And just someone that you're working with that understands what you're going through helps get the day through. And it's okay to get onto a meeting like we're having now, a Teams meeting, and saying, how are you? How's everything going? How can we help? Are you okay? And those words really resonates within a caregiver. And I do want to speak to caregivers who are parents that are caregivers, whether they have a child who is on the autism spectrum or have ADHD. That is also so valuable for them to hear that they're being supported, not only by their managers and their colleagues, but within the internal groups that we set up for our employees.
Oh, that's great information. And so just wondering if you could point to something that you've experienced, from your employer that could be duplicated across the organization as very helpful to, a working caregiver, someone that was going through what you were going through at the time, because not only were you dealing with an ill parent, but you also had the distance issue,
right?
And that makes it even harder when you have to do the traveling and you're not right there where you can go across town and and do something really quickly and get back to the job.
Right.
You have that distance.
I think one of the great things about Saint-Gobain is that every single employee is given a laptop and they're able to work from home. But not only are they able to work from home, if for some reason they have to travel around the world to some other place to be with their family, to be with their parents, they can still log in and work no matter what time it is. One of the things I stress is that I don't care what time you get your work done, as long as you meet the deadlines. So I'm not going to nitpick if I don't see the green light on when I go on my computer at 8 o'clock in the morning and I don't see you there. But I've gotten the email that you have finished that project, or you have hit that deadline, or you have communicated to me what the next steps were in whatever you're doing. That is what is important. The productivity continues. So when you have a caregiver, I've had people who have actually been in the doctor's office waiting for their parents to come back with the doctor, and they're getting work done. So we have to loosen the reins on how we control people in this era, where being on these platforms and having social Teams and Riverstream and StreamYard and Zoom are available to us at the drop of a dime. I've even conducted meetings on the way, taking people to appointments in my car on my company phone, and just have it mounted up on the dashboard while I'm driving so I can still participate in the meeting.
Yeah.
Dahlia, you obviously are a caregiver, and we're a caregiver, and is a caregiver, and you've got the experience. But how do you help like a manager with good intentions that has no experience with any of this? Are there some tips that you can give a manager?
Yes. One, be empathetic. There's a difference. And of course, we always say there's a difference between sympathetic and empathetic. Put yourself in the position of your employee and make yourself a steward, or the better word is of servantship to your employees. That's the best thing to tell a manager. Tell the manager about EAPs, employee assistance programs. Make sure that the manager understands that that is a good avenue that an employee can take to help them navigate being a caregiver. And it's important for the employee to know that it's not just taking care of that other person, but taking care of yourself. That you have therapists available, that you have through your insurance company, that you have numbers that you can call to say, I need help, whether it is getting support, whether it is getting therapy, whether you need a group setting, whether you need a virtual setting. So employers and managers need to know what the compensation and benefits packages that are available to their employees. That's very important. Communication. Let the employee know, communicate what's going on so that I can prepare our team to be able to fill in on those gaps where you cannot be there.
What tips do you have for that employee to go to their manager, to go to their supervisor and say, this is what I'm going through. I need some kind of support and flexibility, because that's where the communication breakdown is. Right. It's a two-way stream of communication. And if the employer doesn't know what the employee needs, there's a big gap. So
exactly.
What tips do you have for the employee?
Number one, know what your compensation and benefits package is. Most people only go to what health insurance I have. And so they never do that deep dive into that packet that they're given at the beginning of the year or at the ending of the year for the new year coming in. Know what your rights are in that packet. That's number one. Communication. It goes both ways, and being transparent about what is going on. Transparency is pivotal. One, it protects you. And two, it allows your manager to make the right decisions to help not only to support you, but to fill in those gaps with your team members. And those are the most vital things that need to be happening. Take care of yourself. It's okay to have a spa day when you're going through all of this. It's okay to get your nails done if that's what you want to do. It's okay to take a couple of hours and go to Top Golf and do a few, what do you call them? Putty? tee offs, whatever it is.
Drives, I don't know.
Whatever it is that can help make your day a little bit better.
Yeah. Wow. That's amen to that. Selma's famous. I like to always quote Selma, but she's famous about always saying, put the oxygen mask on you first if you're going to help somebody else, just like the airlines.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's it exactly.
There you go.
Dahlia, when Selma and I talk to our clients, two things become apparent. One, exactly what you just said, just to reiterate the communication piece, clients will admit November, December, for benefit managers is like tax season for accountants, right? It's like big sign-ups and communications. But then the rest of the year, we don't really do a good job communicating benefits. So that's one thing I know that organizations admit they could do better. But the other one that we have found that Selma and I have talked to clients about is that whatever you want to call them, ERGs, focus groups, but they do leverage these groups, especially around the caregiving space. Have you or your organization leveraged any of these?
We do have ERGs, which are employee resource groups. Some people call them BRGs, business resource groups. And we have committees. So we have a parent committee that sort of fills in for parents. Our ERGs have been advocates pushing for better benefits for working caregivers. And so with Saint-Gobain, they started an initiative that's been rolling out for 2025 for working caregivers. But really, everything starts with grassroots within an organization. If you don't ask for it, it won't happen. Mm-hmm. And so tapping into those employee resource groups, if you're not a member, become a member, become an ally. Let them know, because most employee resource groups will do surveys, whether it is once a quarter, whether it's annually, whether it's biannually, and put in there, I really do want to know more about caregiving and what can you advocate for better compensation and benefits packages that also encompass working caregivers. Ask for, is there a neurodiversity initiative? Ask for those things. Is there something that helps our employees who are retiring and maybe facing these things? Mm-hmm. Is there something that we can tap into so that we can start preparing if in the event we become caregivers or need to be given caregiving? So you have to advocate.
I love that. I love that. Dahlia, we know you're a caregiver advocate and a leader. You approached us one day about doing some education for your organization, which normally Selma and I are approaching clients to ask them if they'd like to do it. But you came to us. Why did you come to us? And now that we did the webinar, what do you think the benefits were? What was the feedback on it?
Well, I have to tell you about how I found out you were writing a book. I actually called Selma, and I call her periodically because she is my mentor. I proudly say that to everyone. Selma has been a big mentor, a big cheerleader for my DEI journey. And I called her to talk to her about, I believe it was just something I wanted to do, and, whether I'm making the decision. Oh, yes. And I wanted to ask her to be on a board of a nonprofit organization that I am a vice chair for. And at the time she says, well, I'm writing a book and I don't know if I'll be able to do that right now. And I'm writing it with my writing partner, Zach. And I said, of course, me being nosy, what book? Because I'm nosy. So she told me about the working caregiver at that point. And the book wasn't, it hadn't been finished yet. But I said to her, this is something we need. I would love to read it. I would love to help on that journey to get this message out. And finally, when the book came, not that I'm pushing you that it took that long. I'm not saying that.
It did. It took 6 years.
Yes, it did.
But finally, when the book came out, you sent me the copy of it and I read it and I was like, did you tell my story? Because this seems like the story that the story in the book. It wasn't my exact story. And so many of us have the same story. And I said, I got to have you in for an interview. When you all are ready to really start doing a webinar, please, I'd like to have you in. And after that, it was a matter of getting you scheduled. I asked one of our ERGs, which is called LEAD, to go ahead and facilitate this and make it work. At the same time, I started talking to our benefits team about working caregivers, and they started saying, well, we've been thinking about that. And I said, it would be great if you watch this. We were able to get some of your books, and we passed it out to our senior VP of HR and to our CHRO, our communications team, and our ERGs. And everyone loved the book, the Working Caregiver. And I can't wait for your next book.
Well, we thank you for your support.
Definitely.
But on behalf of Working Caregivers, we thank you for the leadership you are doing in HR and your organization to support caregivers. It's amazing.
Yeah.
We have time for one more, Selma, if you want to close comments.
Just wondering, in terms of the benefits of our webinar, like, did you hear feedback regarding, because our goal in being there, as you know, we discussed before we came, we had meetings with you about basically just raise awareness around the whole working caregiver issue, that you have it, organization, whether you know it or not.
Right.
And the majority of your employees are going to be impacted by it. Mm-hmm. So what do you think were some of the benefits of having the webinar?
The greatest benefit was to bring awareness to our comps and benefits program that this is something that's needed. And that looking ahead, including that as part of your FMLA, which is your family medical leave, or leave of absence, making this a part of it is essential to evolving as an organization. And so it is on their purview. It is on their radar. It is talked about when we have leadership meetings, and integrating it into the fabric of Saint-Gobain is an imperative for the benefits teams.
As Zach said, we're so happy that we were able to be a part of that experience. And it was great. It was great for us as well as for the company. So
it really was. And we can't wait to have some of that lobster tower down at the beach with you.
I know. We got to meet down there, and we'll go to one of those restaurants. I know what it looks like, but I couldn't even tell you the name.
Well, thank you so much, Dahlia, for joining us today. We really appreciate your insights as an employer and your insights regarding your own caregiver experience and the lessons you learned. So thank you so much. We truly appreciate you joining us as our guest today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Dahlia. You rock. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to catch new episodes of Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees podcast, every other Tuesday. Please also visit our website, invisibleemployeeadvocates.com, to subscribe to our newsletter, purchase our book, and learn more about how we can help you strengthen your workplace to become more supportive of working caregivers.